Sikkim 365 and Baylor Plus have teamed up to bring Baylor fans the ultimate content bundle. You can sign up now for $17.99 a month, a $5 monthly savings, and get instant access to all premium content on both websites. For more information, visit either Sikkim365.com or BaylorPlus.com today. What's up, Baylor family? Welcome into another episode of Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. It's Wednesday, November 13th, and it's time for our weekly visit with Baylor Director of Sports Journalism, Jerry Hill. Jerry, soccer season has come to an end, unfortunately. I know that they were hoping to get back into the NCAA tournament, but that did not work out after their loss in the Big 12 tournament. And I think there was a lot of movement in the right direction. Right. But with that, both basketball teams are full steam ahead. Volleyball continues on a hot streak, and football is back in action this weekend against West Virginia on the road. And I want to start with the volleyball team because right now they're on as an impressive of a run as they have been all season, even though they had the win over TCU mixed in this, but they've won 7 matches in a row. They've only dropped 4 sets in all of those matches. In the last 3, they've swept Colorado, Texas Tech, and UCF 9-0. And so that's really impressive considering they're there for a while. It was when they were winning, they weren't sweeping when they had a chance to. Now they've got those sweeps under their belts. And that three-game losing streak that they had seemed like a long time ago now. What are your thoughts on this stretch that they're in right now?
Yeah, and when I talked to Coach McGuire this week, he talked about the seniors kind of leading the way in that. You know, they've won, like you said, they've won 7 in a row, and most of those were kind of, just taking care of business. I would say the TCU win was kind of the one exception where they won that one in 5, but that was a win over a ranked team. Otherwise, they were beating the teams they should beat. So, but that's what a good team does, is they beat the teams they should beat. And they're sitting here at 9-3 in conference and kind of climbing the ladder. I believe they're tied for 3rd now, going into tonight's match at Kansas State. So they're really on a good roll and hoping to keep it going against Kansas State and Kansas this week.
Yeah, so 17-6 overall, 9-3 in conference. You mentioned the games at Kansas State in Manhattan, and then the important showdown with Kansas. But what is the overall outlook for the Big 12 right now? And sitting at 9-3, you would feel pretty good about their position going into these last games. But it seems like Arizona State might have this one, unless there's some upsets that happen. It probably has this one wrapped up for the Big 12 championship.
Yeah, I mean, Arizona State sitting there at 12-1. They're in really good shape, and I did look at their schedule, and I think they've got a very favorable schedule down the stretch. So, they've won 11 in a row since Baylor beat them way back, and they seem to be kind of in the driver's seat for the conference race. So even though Baylor's sitting just a couple of games out, it would obviously help if you had Arizona State left on your schedule, because then you could make up one game right there, but that's not the case. Kansas, which had been leading, lost to both Arizona and Arizona State. So they're now sitting with 2 losses at 11-2. So Baylor can pass them or at least catch them this week. So that would be big to kind of, again, keep moving up the ladder. And I think if you sweep this week, you're probably sneaking into that top 16 range, which again, that's hosting the NCAA tournament 1st and 2nd round if you can get up in there in the RPI rankings.
Yeah. I mean, that's the ultimate goal now. I mean, you want the higher finishing conference, the better, because that means you're still winning, but getting the ability to host those first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament, obviously big and a goal for this team. Moving on to basketball, both teams full force now. Women's basketball has played 3 games, men's played 2. Let's start with the women. And obviously injury bug a little bit early already this season. You hope it's out of the way. Janet Van Geitenbeek, torn ACL, that was recently announced. Unfortunate there. And then Bella Fauntleroy being out against Oregon as well. That was their loss, and a game that they had a really great comeback, but they weren't able to finish off there late. And you would think with both of them available, they have an opportunity to win that game, obviously on the road. So against a Big Ten opponent now, I was about to say Pac-12, but a Big Ten opponent. So it's not the worst thing in the world, especially considering the injuries. But overall, I mean, initial impressions of this team and where they're headed towards the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think obviously with the women, maybe just not as deep as you'd like, and particularly losing Jana this early in the year to torn ACL. I hate it for her because she was really playing well. I mean, she was, playing with some speed. She would come off the bench, but she would give them some great minutes off the bench and really, as fast as Jada Walker can be sometimes, Jana would actually kind of speed up the tempo. So that's a big loss. And then Bella actually got hurt, first 2 minutes of that game at Oregon. And you think about Bella being the one that had just had a career high of 14 rebounds in the previous game. So I just think, and she's an elite defender as well. So I think if just Bella had been able to play that whole game, I think Baylor wins. Again, maybe not handily, but I think they win that game, and it would have been a huge road game, a huge road win. I know that Oregon had a down year last year, but you think about this as a team that was in the Final Four in 2019 when Baylor played them, and has really been on a good road. Probably, I know they even talked about it, I think maybe in the broadcast with Sabrina Ionescu there, they might have been the favorite in 2020 until COVID happened. So this is a team that it's not been that long ago that they were really one of the elite teams in the country. So, and they had a lot of transfer, I think they had 7 in the transfer. So, it was just a new team. I think it's a team that's probably going to be really good by the end of the year. But as far as Baylor, I like what I've seen so far. I like the fight that they had in that one. I know you don't ever like to look at moral victories or this or that, but they were down 16 in the fourth quarter and actually came back and took the lead there with about a minute and a half to go. Just couldn't get it done there at the end, but it was a great comeback. I think they had a 17-2 run and then went on a 7-0 run to take the lead on a putback by Aaronette Vonleh, who actually is an Oregon native and a Colorado transfer. So, Colt, I like what I've seen from them so far. You'd like to have a little more depth, but I think they have a lot of nice pieces, and I still think this is going to be a really good basketball team.
Yeah, so they return to action on Thursday against East Texas A&M. Weird thing to say there. It kind of threw me off a little bit. But tip is for 7 p.m. Central Time, and you can watch it on ESPN+. On the men's side of thing, obviously that road loss, not technically a road loss, neutral site loss to Gonzaga was rough. We didn't get to visit about that one last week. Thanks for filling in with Justin Hoff on that one. But, man, that the neutral site bounce-back victory over Arkansas, the way that set up, I think, was perfect. I mean, you don't want to lose the game to Gonzaga, but there was no downtime of preparing, for maybe a Sam Houston like they will play on Tuesday night, play this evening or yesterday evening at the time of this recording, but on Tuesday evening. But they just went straight into this Arkansas game and from start to finish had control of this game. I mean, there's some times where it got kind of close, but you felt like they were really in control for the majority of that game.
Yeah, never trailed, and it just seemed like every time, that Arkansas would get on a run or maybe even tie it up, that, Baylor would answer. And that's what, really good teams do. And I mean, you look at that opener and you lose by 38. And I could be wrong on this, Colt, but I think they count that as a road game. I think they count that as a true road game, even though it's not their main arena. So again, that's one you hate to lose like that. It certainly wasn't, a shocker that they lost it, but just the way that they lost it. But I think it says a little bit about the character of this team that they were able to put that behind them and go in and play a very good Arkansas team. Again, I think this will be one of the better teams in the country by the end of the year. They've got obviously a lot of new faces as well. I believe they had one returner back, period, on that roster, one scholarship player returning. He kind of did, Calipari kind of did the same thing Jerome Tang did when he went to Kansas State. It was a total flip over. So, he's done a great job bringing in a lot of great players, Kentucky players, but transfers from all over the country. But I love the way that Baylor responded anytime that Arkansas made a run. You'd like to see them kind of, I guess, keep the foot on the gas and put them away. But again, anytime that Arkansas got on a run and got close, Baylor was able to respond and answer, and loved that VJ Edgecombe had a much better game. He struggled in that first one. He still wasn't shooting the ball great, but he did show in this one, and I think he showed a little bit in the first one too. He can affect the game. Coach Drew talked about this. He can affect the game in so many ways, and that's kind of what he did, against Arkansas. His rebounds, assists. I think he led them in assists, had 8 rebounds. Yeah. So, it was an impressive game. Love to see Jaden Nunn step up the way that he did and really kind of, led them through most of the first half. So, it's and Norchad played great. It was great to see him get a double-double. So, you needed that, Colt, but it was good to see them actually do it. And again, like you said, a neutral site. And, normally you would think, well, it's Dallas, so probably a lot more Baylor people, but it was pretty evenly split. And I thought Arkansas at times was much louder. So that was certainly not a home game for Baylor, but really good win. Good, it felt like an NCAA tournament type game.
Yeah. So I think we talked about the ladies' injuries, but Langston Love still being out for those first 2 games. That's going to be a big piece for Baylor coming back from all the things that he can do. Obviously being a good shooter, but he's just a bigger guard, defending a lot of different positions.
Yeah.
We talked about VJ, but is there any one thing that it might be shooting with the team. It's just like once it comes around, they're going to be really tough to beat because it seems like effort, high energy, good. The undersized for the most part, but really good rebounders at every single position. It seems like obviously throwing VJ and Langston in that, Norchad being one of those guys. But is there any one thing that you're just really waiting to see pop from this team?
It probably would be the shooting. That I think this is going to be a better 3-point shooting team than they've shown so far. One of the things coming out of the Gonzaga game, obviously, was post defense, and I thought that was much better against Arkansas. And this is a very physical team. Sometimes Baylor is not that physical, but I think this is a very physical team. VJ is up among there too, but Norchad for sure. I think Josh brings a little bit of that. I thought he played much better against Arkansas. And so, I would say the shooting is probably the biggest thing. I think they're still kind of getting used to each other and where they're going to be and all that, but that'll come. This is a team with very few returners, and particularly with Langston being out right now that, they just don't have a lot of experience or even, returners at all. So, I think it's a deal where that chemistry and will come as the season goes along.
Yeah. So at the time of recording this, Baylor's set to play Sam Houston on Tuesday evening. Later this week, on Sunday, they will play Tarleton. Both of those are home games, and then they're in the Bahamas Mar Hoops Championship. And the first game there is number 22, who's now number 22. We're not preseason ranked. St. John's. They're now in the top 25. Tennessee is a possible opponent there, another top 10, top 15 type team. And then it just gets even harder. You talk about Big 12, but you also have UConn on the schedule. So they have a lot of upcoming games that are going to be challenging. And we're going to really figure out where this team is. And they got 2 of them out of the way. They're 1-1. You hope they can build on that. And obviously getting the first game in Foster this year will be exciting against Sam Houston and obviously against Tarleton. Let's move on to football. Obviously, an off week, really crazy to have 2 off weeks in a single season, but they have it. And I think they came at really good times. And you talk about that TCU win, how emotional that victory was and the things that they did in that game to win the game. I say that they played really physical. You don't typically in a game that's in the 30s like it was, you don't talk about physical defense, but I thought both defenses played very physical. Sawyer got a little dinged up. He was in a walking boot after the game. And I just think that off week was at a great time to get over it emotionally, get healthy again for this final 3-game stretch that starts against West Virginia this weekend in Morgantown. And any initial thoughts on this game in a place that Baylor's never won?
Yeah, that's the thing that jumps out when you're 0-6 at a place you've never won. But I will say, I think maybe other than a couple of games, they've all been close, and I think in some cases Baylor was probably the better team, but that is a tough environment to play in. Their fans really get into it. I'm glad it's an afternoon game and not a night game when they've kind of got oiled up a little bit. So, I like the fact that it's an afternoon game. West Virginia has used a couple of different quarterbacks. Garrett Green has been hurt the last couple of games, so you got to kind of go in there preparing for a couple of guys. I believe Nico is the other one, Marchio, and he's done well. I mean, they're 2-0 with him, but they've won very close games the last couple of weeks, and that's one thing I noticed, Colt, when I looked at their stuff is I believe they're 3-1 in one-score games. They've been blown out a couple of times, and they've blown out a couple of people, but in close games, they're 3-1. So, This is a team that has been in, a lot of those type games. So if it does come down to the fourth quarter, they've been in those, and so is Baylor. And I think it's good that, Baylor was able to get that one against TCU where they had to pull it out at the end because, again, they had not had a lot of those close, games other than, Colorado and BYU, I guess, were a little bit that way too. But so that was good to get a win like that came down to the wire and getting ready for one that, playing at West Virginia, it could very well be that way again.
Yeah. You talked about all the close games of the 6 they played. Obviously, remember 2012, which was a 7-point game. 2014 was actually a 14-point game, but we know Baylor that was an upset across the board.
Yeah.
16, interesting enough, the way that one ended up. Baylor had lost the 6 or 5 games in a row. That ended up being a 3-point game, and then the blowout was the 2018 season,
right?
When it got away that was in Matt Rule's second year, and I think it ended up being like 55-18 or something crazy like that.
Right.
It just really snowballed on them. But every game there, 2020. Was a double overtime game. And then we remember what happened in 22 where it was back and forth late after Baylor had the lead, and then they ended up losing by a field goal. So you expect this one to be close. And I, you mentioned winning close games. Baylor to get that the way they did against TCU, but really the setup of all those 3 games, they won those 3 games in different ways. The Tech game had control all throughout, basically the entire game, won it big. Oklahoma State was really back and forth, and Baylor was able to score late and put it away. And then against TCU, you have to win it on the last drive of the game, and they did. So I think the mentality of this team has to be pretty strong going in this game. Say, hey, we've won it in 3 different ways. West Virginia is not much different than the teams that we just faced. Let's go out there and do it again. Whatever way we need to do it, we can get it done.
Yeah, and I think offensively, I don't know that West Virginia is, as good as some of the teams that Baylor has already played. So I think it's more West Virginia is better on the defensive end than maybe some of those are. So that's where the test will be. Can Baylor run the ball? Because I know Coach Aranda talked about how maybe the interior of their defensive line and predominantly their front 7, but in the interior of the defensive line, that's the strength of their defense. So can you run against their strength, which Baylor has done a great job running the ball these last 3 weeks. You'd love to see that keep going. And then, it obviously opens up things for Sawyer too, when you can get that run game going. So that'll be an interesting matchup, Baylor's offense against their defense this week.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued. It seems like they're going to be pretty healthy. I know when he was asked about the health of the team, there was no one specifically. I mean, obviously he mentioned Sawyer being in the boot after the game, not being in the boot any longer. Dom Richardson's no longer with the team, as he mentioned, which was, we haven't seen him in a while. We hadn't seen him since the BYU game. So it kind of made sense that he was going to be out. But outside of those 2, I think you mentioned Micah Gifford, a reserve wide receiver who has, I don't even know if he had maybe 1 catch on the year. So it was really encouraging on that front that this bye week might have just allowed them to get healthy across the board. Maybe some guys that are still lingering that he didn't mention, but I think that has to be encouraging, knowing that you're going on the road and basically everybody's healthy when West Virginia is coming off a rivalry game against Cincinnati, where they needed just about everything to win that game.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think in Coach Aranda's words were, this is probably as healthy as we've been all year. So, I think that's a really good thing. I think in that sense, the bye week came at a good time. It's kind of funny, Colt, how this has worked out that I don't know that either time was a real good time, at least when you're looking at it, to take that bye week. Because the first one, you've lost 3 in a row. And you're going into a bye week and you're like, man, we got to sit with this for 2 weeks. And now, on the second bye week, you're on a 3-game winning streak. You don't want to rest. You want to keep playing, and you get another bye week. So, how do they respond to that too? Like, you've been sitting for a couple of weeks. And I know that was one of the things that Coach Aranda talked about, is that it can be good if you're intentional about it and you do the things you need to do, but it can hurt you if you're just kind of sitting around waiting. I don't think they were sitting around waiting. I think they were working on some things, and probably particularly on the defensive end where, they've struggled, in the pass defense, they've struggled with missed tackles. So I suspect that was where a lot of the work was done during that bye week, is kind of fixing some of those things.
Yeah, I'm really anxious, obviously, coming out of that bye week. against Texas Tech, and then Baylor goes and rushes for 250 yards, and they've not looked back running the football.
Right.
Maybe Coach Aranda has something for that secondary, obviously not facing the same passing type of teams,
Right.
but still facing capable teams. West Virginia, Kansas specifically, Houston's struggled a little bit throwing the ball and just doesn't do it as much, but they will be tested. I mean, West Virginia wants to take deep shots. So do you envision something like the running game taking off and then the secondary taking off the way that the run game did?
Yeah, I think if you're going to finish, on a 3-game winning streak, which would be a 6-game winning streak, I think your secondary has to be better. And certainly the bye week helps in that sense of just kind of, nailing some stuff down. And I know one of the things he talked about is when they're in zone, communicating in the zone, knowing your zone responsibilities, things like that. So, I suspect that those things have been, rectified, and that you're going to see hopefully a much better secondary in these last 3 games, because I think coming into the year, Colt, if I remember right, I think the secondary was kind of thought of as one of their strengths, with Caden Jenkins coming back and the veteran safeties. So, hopefully that bye week helps them, and they got some things fixed, and they'll just look a lot better, in these last 3 games.
Yeah, I mean, West Virginia is always going to test them a little bit differently running the football compared to what they face. I mean, you look at Colorado, Iowa State, and then obviously Tech, Oklahoma State, and TCU. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to throw the football. And Tech being the kind of the outlier a little bit, they had Taj Brooks that they wanted to run with. But in general, those offenses are built around throwing the football. And now they're going to face some teams that want to run it at their core. I mean, 3 in a row, West Virginia, Houston, and then Kansas are going to run the football. That's what they do. And they're going to throw it a little bit, but if you can stop the run, you're going to have a pretty good chance, and then your secondary will be tested. So any final thoughts? I mean, just in general about Baylor athletics right now and where they're heading into the winter months.
Yeah, this is kind of the exciting time for me, Cole. Just the crossover where you've got basketball playing, you got volleyball still playing, obviously football on a 3-game winning streak. It's just a fun time. And, I'd love to see some wins this weekend. I'd love to see football get another win against West Virginia, in men's basketball, women's basketball, if they can have a clean slate this weekend. So it'll be fun. And we're not that far off from the NCAA tournament for volleyball. So, just keep watching and listening.
Yep. All right, Baylor fans, that's going to do it for this episode of Inside Baylor Sports. As always, thanks to each of you who tune in and listen. For Jerry Hill, I'm Colt Barber. Have a great Wednesday, and Sick 'em Bears.
Sick 'em Bears.